Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Friday, June 25th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Amitha Sharma, in for Maya Trabulsi. The former Minneapolis police officer who murdered George Floyd, sparking a national movement against racial injustice, was sentenced today. Derek Chauvin received 22 and a half years in prison, short of the 30 years prosecutors had asked for. Camila Bernal begins our coverage in Minneapolis.
Of a trial court.
It's the end of a chapter.
270 months. That's 270. That is a 10-year addition to the presumptive sentence of 150 months.
Judge Peter Cahill announcing the punishment after a jury found Derek Chauvin guilty of second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter for his role in George Floyd's death.
But most importantly, we need to recognize the pain of the Floyd family.
Chauvin now also faces federal charges.
Derek has played over and over in his head the events of that day. I've seen the toll it has taken on him.
I do want to give my condolences to the Floyd family.
Floyd's family speaking out about their loss.
What was going through your head when you had your knee on my brother's neck?
Prosecutors for the state of Minnesota had requested a 30-year prison sentence. Chauvin's defense attorney, Eric Nelson, argued that the former officer should have instead received probation and time served, or at least a sentence lower than what the law guided. But for many, it's a way to bring nationwide racial and police reform.
Do you wish that he was still here with us?
Yeah, but he is.
Through his spirit?
Yes.
In Minneapolis, I'm Camila Bernal.
Chauvin could end up serving only 15 years in prison with good behavior. Local activists here at home have marched the streets of San Diego demanding justice for George Floyd after his death and during the trial. KPBS reporter Alejandra Rangel had a chance to talk to some of them on whether they think justice was served.
Oh, that feels good, but it still doesn't feel justified. It doesn't feel like it's enough.
Former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin was sentenced to 22 and a half years in the murder of George Floyd. Although some may feel justice was served, San Diego community activist Tasha Williamson thinks otherwise.
When will officers get the maximum? You know, when will officers get the maximum sentence that my black brothers, my black sisters, and our black children get?
Shane Harris, a community activist, says he spoke to members of Floyd's family.
30 years was what the family as a whole had requested, and that would have been very reasonable, a maximum sentence of 30 years. 8 years off is a step in the right direction. It certainly offers some level of closure and healing.
Ahead of the decision, Chauvin's mother spoke in court, telling the judge she believed in her son's innocence, adding he isn't racist. Williamson says people need to understand what racism is.
You know, I think about Coronado High School and how these folks are saying they're not racist. We watched Coronado High School parents talk about they are not racist, but yet not see that tortillas being tossed in a high school is a racist act.
She says the recent incident at Coronado High School serves as a reminder of the work that lies ahead. And Yusuf Miller, who's been advocating for social justice in the county, says the fight continues.
Will we fall apart? History has told us we will. But us activists, we're going to try to weave everyone back together, keep them together to move forward.
Alexandra Rangel, KPBS News.
San Diego County's Human Relations Commission is holding a special meeting in response to outrage over tortilla throwing at a high school basketball championship game. Video showed tortillas being flung at the Orange Glen High School team, which is largely Latino. Coronado High School's basketball coach was fired as a result. A man who says he brought the tortillas to the game told our media partner KGTV that tossing tortillas after a victory was a tradition at UC Santa Barbara, where he went to school. The county meeting is set for 5 p.m. Monday. San Diego police officers and firefighters are set to get raises next week. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says Mayor Todd Gloria announced agreements with the respective unions today.
If approved by the City Council, the deals would give sworn police officers a minimum 3.2% raise on July 1st. Firefighters would get a minimum 2.5% raise, with bigger pay bumps for specialty jobs and incentives to pursue higher education. Separate from the recent agreements, firefighters are also getting back their guaranteed retirement income after the court struck down a 2012 ballot measure that excluded firefighters from city pensions. Union leaders say things are getting better.
It means that we're no longer the only municipal fire department in California without a pension for firefighters. It means that death and disability benefits for firefighters killed in the line of duty will be returning. And then on the heels of that, getting, again, a meaningful bump in pay and benefits, I think just suggests that the leadership in this city has changed.
For years, San Diego police officers were also paid significantly less than their counterparts in neighboring law enforcement agencies. That led to high turnover, but police union leaders say the raises implemented over the past 6 years have helped.
We just need to keep competitive like any other job. I never want to get to the point again where our officers can get $1,000 a month raise by changing the color of their uniforms.
The two deals will cost $10 million over the next year and have already been approved by union members. The City Council is due to vote on the two agreements on Tuesday. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
California is extending the ban on evictions for unpaid rent through the end of September. That's just days before it was set to expire. Governor Gavin Newsom and state lawmakers announced the deal today, which also uses federal money to pay off tenants owed back rent.
Anybody that has been impacted by COVID that owes rent going back to last April, not just this April, last April, we will pay 100% of that rent. We'll also pay that rent, 100% of it going forward through September.
There are a few requirements to be eligible. Tenants must pay at least 25% of what they owe by September 30th, sign a declaration of economic hardship because of the pandemic, and they must make 80% or less of the area median income. In spite of these rental aid programs, some people have already lost their homes. Race and equity reporter Christina Kim explores what might happen when all the protections are finally lifted.
I felt that I had let my kids down as a man, being able to support them and keep a roof on over their head.
Gabriel Guzman still remembers the fear he felt when he was evicted from his home in Chula Vista last December. He's worried about the impact it's having on his children.
And even my youngest daughter, my 3-year-old, would always ask when we were going home. She's like, "I'll go home." And she would cry.
Eviction moratoriums were supposed to keep people housed during the pandemic, but Guzman missed paying rent for a few months, and his landlord didn't renew his lease. Gilberto Vera is a senior attorney at the Legal Aid Society of San Diego. He says Guzman should never have been evicted.
In a normal situation, that's not something that a tenant could be evicted under the state protections.
It shouldn't have happened, but Guzman's experience is not unique. Even with the moratorium, landlords were technically able to evict tenants if they moved into the property themselves, sold the property, or wanted to withdraw the property from the rental market altogether.
In February, there probably had been about almost 1,000 sheriff lockouts since the beginning of the pandemic.
Now, with protections set to expire in the coming months and rental relief money only just beginning to trickle out, advocates and city officials say there will be more evictions. Ginger Hitsky is a local landlord. She says that even if all the rental assistance is fully dispersed, she expects a major turnover in the rental market due to surging housing prices. In some cases, landlords are incentivizing tenants to leave.
You give someone cash and you ask for their keys. Like you incentivize them to leave. You give someone $2,000, $3,000 to leave. If you can recover, if you can increase rents so that in the next 12 months you could make an additional $4,000, it's worth it to you.
San Diego is particularly vulnerable to evictions because it doesn't have an established housing rights culture, according to Grace Martinez, director of ACE San Diego, a tenants' rights organization.
If you go to LA, a tenant receives a notice and they will think, where do I need, how do I fight this? In San Diego, when a tenant receives a notice, they're thinking, where am I going to find a place to live?
Martinez says San Diego needs to create a culture where people know their rights. A big part of that is having access to legal help. But according to the left-leaning Center for American Progress, nationwide, only 10% of tenants have legal representation in court cases, compared to 90% of landlords. Vera says without legal help, tenants can find themselves on the street fast.
Eviction cases are one of the fastest moving lawsuits through the court systems. So a tenant can if they don't respond quickly and meaningfully, they could be evicted within 2 months from when the landlord files the eviction.
Earlier this month, the San Diego Board of Supervisors approved a draft plan that would allocate $15 million of federal money to provide legal services and counseling for tenants.
The motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present and voting aye.
And there could be another silver lining on the horizon for both tenants and landlords. Governor Newsom recently released a plan to pay all back rent. Vera of Legal Aid says without that type of help, people will be pushed into a cycle of housing insecurity.
Because then they're in a situation where not only are they being displaced, but they're also saddled with this mountain of debt that they might not be able ever to recover, which impacts their ability to be able to rent in the future.
Despite all of these programs, Guzman, the Chula Vista tenant, is still uncertain about what the future holds once all the protections are gone.
I understand what people are going through. They want to get back to normal life, but we're gonna pay the price.
He found a new place to live and is looking for work. But even now, he's worried he'll be evicted again. Cristina Kim, KPBS News.
KPBS investigative reporter Claire Trageser contributed to this story. The cities of San Diego and Chula Vista have set up their own emergency rental assistance programs for residents. Everyone else can apply through San Diego County's program. You can find out more about the eligibility requirements and apply at the websites on your screen. County health officials say they will be closing more vaccination sites as demand falls for shots. KPBS health reporter Matt Hoffman says all of the larger superstations will also cease operations in the next few days, but the vaccination push is not over.
I've been wanting to get it for a while.
At the vaccination superstation in the South Bay, people like Anthony Stewart are getting their shots before the Sharp Healthcare run site closes over the weekend.
I admit I was a little hesitant. I just waited just because I figured I was young. I'm young. I would take my chances initially, and then I got a little bit of vaccine FOMO. And so I was like, people are going out. I don't want to have any restrictions on where I can't go, where I can go.
Those getting their first doses, like Max Barra, will have to schedule their second appointments elsewhere. Barra contracted COVID-19 back in January, and it nearly hospitalized him.
15 days of misery, and then after the fever and everything broke, I had about another 2 weeks of dizziness and confusion.
He has some level of immunity since getting infected, but wanted to boost it with the vaccination and is looking forward to some normalcy.
Getting my life back, being able to go out.
Others say reasons for delaying were they were afraid of possible side effects, but ultimately chose to get the shot.
I knew that everybody was doing it because before I was unsure. But after that, I got pretty comfortable because my sister did it too.
Just under 100,000 people came through this site alone, but the push to vaccinate people in an area hard hit by COVID-19 is continuing.
We keep going. Even though the super sites are closing, the San Diego Latino Health Coalition is still assisting people with vaccination appointments, and we're having vaccination pop-up sites.
Sandra Mendoza with the Chicano Federation and Latino Health Coalition says teams of community health workers called promotoras are still one of the best ways to get the vaccination message out.
And they do a lot of the talking for us to the community, so they're very one-to-one, and they're at tabling events, they're at food distribution events, they're at school events, they're handing out PPE gear and providing resources for families. So they're the ones that are actually breaking the barriers for the hesitancy.
The county's vaccination dashboard shows 77% of residents ages 12 and over are partially vaccinated, while 65% have completed all of the doses. The superstations were designed to push through thousands of people per day. The one in Del Mar will stop administering doses on Tuesday, and county health officials also expect to close some additional smaller vaccination sites by the end of the month. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
And if you're eligible to get vaccinated but haven't yet, we have all the information about how and where to get one on our website, kpbs.org. Click on the vaccines link on our homepage to find a location close to you. Vice President Kamala Harris said the United States must be consistent in dealing with issues along the southern border. She visited El Paso, Texas today, her first trip to the region as head of the Biden administration's response. The past few months have seen record numbers of migrants attempting to cross the border. U.S. Customs and Border Protection recorded more than 180,000 encounters in May alone, the most in more than 2 decades.
I'm committed to ensuring that we engage in an active way on the root causes, on addressing the cause and effect, and also being partners in the Western Hemisphere, understanding that we have a responsibility, and if we ignore that responsibility, it will visit itself upon us in a very domestic way.
Harris also said the administration is making progress in its commitment to ensuring the immigration system is orderly and humane. As California braces for what could be its worst fire season because of the drought, new reporting by our sister station, Cap Radio, and NPR's California Newsroom reveals Governor Newsom dramatically overstated what he's done to prevent wildfires. Earlier, I spoke with the reporter who broke the story, Cap Radio's Scott Rod. So, Scott, what did the governor promise to do to stem wildfires when he first took office in 2019, and what did he actually do?
So he entered office promising to tackle these priority fire prevention projects, and that includes things like forest thinning and prescribed burns. He said that these projects treated 90,000 acres, but our reporting found that state data shows less than 12,000 acres were actually done, and that's just a fraction of what he claimed.
Yeah, in fact, your investigation found that Newsom overstated how many acres were treated with fuel breaks and prescribed burns by 690%. What did the governor's office say about your findings?
So we had repeated requests for interview with the governor, but they were all declined. We did get to speak to CAL FIRE Chief Tom Porter, however. He told us that while the scope of the original project was 90,000, he said that they whittled it down over time, and that was the work they were able to get done. However, again, it's worth noting, CAL FIRE and the governor both said that 90,000 acres were treated. And so we are holding them accountable to those claims.
And have you been able to quantify the toll of Newsom not only not doing what he said he would do for wildfire prevention, but actually cutting CAL FIRE's wildfire prevention budget?
So our investigation also looked at funding for this prevention work. And we found that last year, the governor cut $150 million from the state's budget for this prevention work. And in that time, overall, prevention work dropped by about half. And it was a crazy fire season, certainly, and it was in the middle of COVID. But these acres are essential to get done in order to mitigate the spread of fires.
And how have survivors of California's recent fires reacted to your reporting?
Survivors we spoke to said that they were pretty disappointed and they felt misled or deceived. I spoke to one who lost his home in the Tubbs fire a few years ago and then also experienced damage to his business in last year's glass fire. He said that he felt Newsom was coming in and making big promises, and he felt optimistic about that, hopeful, but seeing that the promises weren't delivered on, he felt deceived.
Now, it's clear that your reporting won't help the governor, who's the target of a recall election. How much do you think it will hurt him?
It's tough to say. Certainly, we've seen that candidates for the recall have jumped in and have seized on this reporting. And also lawmakers, mostly Republicans, have come out and said, hey, look, we want to know more information about this. We would like to know, how much prevention work has actually gotten done, what has funding looked like, and where have there been misstatements or potential misleading of the public on this prevention work.
Thanks so much for speaking with us today, Scott. Terrific reporting.
Thanks again for having me.
There has been a lot of talk about the heat wave, and let me just say the core of this heat wave, which is historic throughout the American West, is going to be in the Northwest. So we're going to miss out on the most intense heat. However, our weekend does trend warmer, and we're still not talking any rain. And because we do trend warmer, there are excessive heat watches in place, gearing up for Sunday into Monday, kind of the peak of the heat, if you will, for most spots in our area. Tonight, we're falling back into the 60s here for San Diego, 64 for the low, with a few clouds as you work your way towards Oceanside. We could be in the upper 50s. Of course, that marine layer does come in for tomorrow morning, so we'll notice those clouds in the usual spots, places like Chula Vista, at least a little bit of cloud cover venturing into tomorrow morning. Afternoon time breaks out into sunshine, 74 for the high tomorrow. Notice Ramona coming in at 89, and as you venture to Mount Laguna, 76, Borrego Springs, 109 degrees. We're not quite in the 110 range, but we'll get there heading into the weekend. So the heat is returning. Those numbers aren't quite as noticeable for the increase for the coastal locations. We go through the mid-70s here and stay there for Sunday and Monday. And actually, we're going to hold on to that right into the middle of the week. Inland locations closer to 90 degrees for Sunday and Monday. So that's where we're starting to trend a little bit warmer with that heat, and we'll actually hold on to that close to Tuesday too. Notice clouds still giving way to sunshine through the afternoon. Mostly sunny times for the mountains, upper 70s on Sunday. That's going to be the warmest day there. The rest of the days, at least in the mid-70s. We won't see any lower 70s in the days to come. And for the deserts, it's really going to be hot. The desert locations really dealing with temperatures in the 110 range for Sunday and Monday. Tuesday, Wednesday, we don't fall off too much, although there is a general trend downward. Hopefully a little bit of relief towards the middle of next week. For KPBS News, I'm AccuWeather meteorologist Melissa Constanzer.
While many Americans stayed home during the pandemic, practiced social distancing, and focused more on hygiene measures, flu cases nearly disappeared. But as Mandy Gaither reports, a new study suggests that not the only winter bug that disappeared, there were several other cases of winter bugs that actually decreased.
It's a silver lining in the dark cloud that's hovered over this past year. While flu cases nearly disappeared during the pandemic, in a study published in the medical journal JAMA Internal Medicine, researchers looking at data from the University of Wisconsin Health found a range of respiratory infections significantly decreased the past flu season as well. Winter seasonal bugs like the flu, respiratory viruses, and seasonal coronaviruses currently average 12 per month, compared with 4,800 per month in previous seasons at that hospital. They also report prescriptions for antibiotics fell by 79%, but don't expect those lower numbers to stay.
People are getting all kinds of viruses because we've just been apart from one another.
The study's researchers say data suggests masks, social distancing, and other health measures used during the pandemic may have helped keep cases for other illnesses lower. But with more people getting back to normal, experts say there's a concern for next flu season.
It's going to be hard to distinguish what's COVID-19, what's influenza, what's all these other things, and so we really need to be ramping up testing right now.
And while the COVID-19 vaccine protects against coronavirus, health experts say to remember it won't stop you from getting sick from other viruses. For Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
Some people in the South Park and North Park neighborhoods are frustrated with construction that's getting rid of parking spaces. City crews are painting curbs red along 30th Street to create bike lanes that separate cyclists from traffic. They're expected to be installed in early July. People who live in apartments along 30th Street say they've had to find somewhere else to park, and that's causing a ripple effect.
The impact is that the cars that were normally on 30th Street are now finding spaces in neighboring streets, and therefore the impact is backing everything up.
Without being able to park our cars, we come home with groceries and park 3 blocks away. It's so hard just to get back to our apartment.
The city says there's a 6-story parking garage off 30th that provides an alternative to street parking. A group called Save 30th Street Parking has hired a lawyer to see what they can do to stop the bike lanes. A measure of our economic recovery is playing out at movie theaters. San Diego Business Journal's Mariel Concepcion explains why so much is riding on the F9 opening in the Friday Business Report.
F9, the 9th installment of the Fast and Furious movie series, is hitting cinemas in the US and Canada. This is the first big budget film to hit exclusively theaters since COVID-19 basically halted the entire movie industry. This is important because the hope is that Fast and Furious will really ramp up summer ticket sales for movie theaters, because operators are basically in recovery mode at this point. In fact, Universal Pictures, which is behind the Fast and Furious saga, they've actually postponed the original release date of May 2020 so that they can release F9 exclusively to movie theaters when it was safe to do so. F9 is not the only flick hitting movie theaters exclusively. There's also a Black Widow movie coming, a remake of Space Jam with LeBron James, and also a DC Comics flick are all scheduled to hit movie theaters this summer.
The U.S. intelligence community today released its long-awaited report on UFOs. However, the unclassified intelligence documents reveal very little that wasn't already known. Government officials reviewed 144 reports of unidentified aerial phenomena and found a logical explanation for just one of them. So in the end, the truth is still out there. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thank you for joining us, and have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley. And by the following: and by viewers like you. Thank you.